Montana Territory, June 1882. The sky boiled low and gray over the open plains east of Fort Shaw, and the wind carried the kind of silence that made a person feel forgotten. Sarah Louden stepped down from the stagecoach with her hands clenched around her small traveling bag. Her boots hit the dusty ground just once before the driver tossed her trunk beside her and cracked the reins, leaving her alone in the middle of the wind-flattened nothing. She looked around. No crowd, no welcoming party, no man with a flower in his hand. Just the postmaster, an old man sweeping dust from the porch of the station, eyeing her with a kind of tired sympathy. "You Sarah Louden?" he asked. She nodded, her voice catching in her throat. He pulled a folded letter from his coat. "Got this for you. Came 2 days back." Her fingers trembled as she opened it. The words were short. "I changed my mind. You are too quiet. I need a wife who can speak her mind." That was all. She stood there for a moment, the paper fluttering in her hand. She had come all the way from Ohio. She had left her sewing job, her only sister, and everything familiar. She had answered a mail-order bride listing from a man named William who promised a home, kindness, and a new life. He had not even come to tell her himself. Sarah did not cry. She just folded the letter, tucked it back into her bag, and sat down on her trunk like it was the only solid thing left in the world. The postmaster cleared his throat. "You got any folks nearby?" "No, sir," she said quietly. He sighed and rubbed his jaw. "Well, there is a boarding house in town. Miss Hargrove runs it clean. You can stay there a few nights if you got coin." "I have some," she said. He nodded and pointed down the road. "Head west 2 blocks. White house with green shutters." She murmured a thank you and started walking, trunk dragging behind her. She kept her eyes low, her shoulders tight. She had always been quiet, always careful, and now it had cost her the only chance she thought she had. She lasted 3 nights at that boarding house before Miss Hargrove gently suggested she could not stay without paying more. Sarah had barely enough left to buy a train ticket back to Ohio, and not enough pride left to go. She sat on the bench outside the Mercantile that morning, watching wagons roll down the street, people passing by with baskets and laughter, when someone stopped in front of her. "I heard you got left behind," the woman said. Sarah looked up. The woman was tall, with sunburned skin, wearing a stitched-up work dress and worn boots. "My brother traps up north, lives off the land, keeps to himself. You seem like the quiet kind. I thought maybe you might want work, or just a place to be for a while." Sarah blinked. "Why would he want me there?" The woman shrugged. "He does not, but he owes me a favor." Sarah hesitated. "What is his name?" "Rhett Jennings." That name meant nothing to her, but something in the woman's face, honest, tired, and not unkind, made her nod. 2 days later, Sarah rode in the back of a supply wagon headed north, her trunk beside her. The woman's name was Martha, and she spoke only when needed. By the time they reached the edge of the lowland forest, it was late afternoon. Rhett Jennings stepped out of the trees with a rifle slung over his shoulder and a look like he had not seen a soul in weeks. He was tall, built like someone who worked hard and did not complain. His coat was patched and his beard was short but rough. His eyes were pale green, steady, and unreadable. "She is staying for a while," Martha said simply. "She is not trouble." He looked at Sarah for a long time. "Fine," he said. "She can sleep in the lean-to. Firewood is stacked by the shed." And he turned and walked away. Sarah did not expect warmth. But the lean-to was dry and there was a blanket. That was enough. The first week passed in silence. Rhett barely spoke to her. He brought back rabbits, fish pelts. She washed them in the creek, salted the meat, folded the hides. She knew how to do those things. He did not thank her, but he did not object either. One morning she found a bundle of kindling beside her door. The next day he left an extra piece of trout by the fire. They shared meals in silence. Sometimes she caught him watching her, like he was trying to figure out what to do with her being there. One morning Sarah was down by the creek when her foot slipped on the rocks. She fell hard, the cold water soaking her dress. She tried to stand, but pain shot up her ankle. Suddenly arms lifted her off the rocks. Rhett had come without a word, carried her back to the cabin, and set her gently on the cot. "You twist it?" he asked, kneeling. "I think so," she whispered. He examined her ankle, then wrapped it with one of his clean shirts, tight and careful. "You should not be out there alone," he said, voice low. "I did not want to bother you." He looked at her, then stood. "You never bother me." That night, he set her dinner on a tray by her bed. When she reached for it, their fingers brushed. She looked up and saw something there, quiet concern, maybe even guilt. "Thank you," she said softly. He nodded. "You are welcome." The next day, he brought her wildflowers in a jar. Said nothing, just set them beside the tray. Her ankle healed slow, but he kept bringing her things: berries, a book he had found in a trading post, a pair of wool socks. One night, a storm rolled in. The wind howled, the lean-to creaked, and just as the thunder cracked, he opened her door. "You should stay inside tonight," he said. She followed him into the cabin. He made space near the hearth, set another blanket for her. They sat in silence, the fire dancing between them. After a long moment, he said, "I am not good with people. Never have been." She looked at him. "Me neither." He glanced at her. "But I do not mind you here." Her chest warmed. "I do not mind you either," she whispered. He smiled just barely and leaned back, eyes still on the fire. Sarah watched him, her heart beating steady, and for the first time in weeks, she felt like she had not failed. She had not been too quiet. She had just needed someone who listened in silence too. By early July, the air around the cabin turned thick with pine scent and the hum of insects. The snowmelt had long since drained off the hills, and the creek ran low, clear enough to see the pebbled bottom. Sarah no longer limped, though she moved slower through the brush, careful where she stepped. Rhett had begun teaching her how to set snares, simple wire loops, half hidden beneath ferns or tucked along game trails. She watched his hands more than the traps. They were steady, scarred across the knuckles, and always gentle when he showed her where to tie the line or how much tension to leave. "You don't pull it too tight," he said one morning, crouched beside her near a hollow log. "Rabbit'll sniff it and spook before it ever steps through." She nodded and mimicked his grip. "How do you know where they'll go?" "They leave prints when the dew's fresh. You learn to read 'em, like pages from a book nobody else sees." Sarah looked down at the smudge of soil, the faint twin marks where something had passed. "I never thought to look that close. You start to notice things when you're alone long enough." She didn't answer, just kept her gaze on the ground until the silence settled between them again, comfortable, not cold. By the next week, she'd caught a rabbit herself. Rhett didn't say anything when she brought it back, but that night, he added a pinch of salt to her portion and gave her the larger share. Later, as the lantern burned low, he asked without looking up, "Do you still think about going back east?" Sarah sat on the floor by the hearth, patching a tear in the hem of her sleeve. "There's nothing waiting for me there." He reached for the knife he'd been sharpening, then paused. "Martha said you worked in a sewing house." "I did. Windowless place. The thread dust made your throat raw by noon." He nodded. "That why your hands are so still, always moving like they remember more work than you give them now." She looked down at her fingers. "I don't notice." "I do." Outside, a coyote called once, then fell quiet. Later, on a day when the wind smelled of dry grass and the air buzzed with heat, Rhett brought home a wounded falcon. Its wing was bent wrong, feathers torn where something had clawed it. "Found it near the ridge," he said, cupping it gently. Sarah took it without hesitation, cradling the bird the way one might hold a child. "Will it live?" "Only if it trusts you." They built a perch in the shed, shaded and high. She fed it scraps with a carved spoon and whispered to it as if it could understand. It never flinched at her voice. One evening, as the sun sank low and the falcon dozed inside, Rhett sat beside her on the porch with a tin cup in his hands. "You've changed this place," he said. She kept her eyes on the horizon. "I only tried to fit into it." He shook his head. "No, You settled the air? Like smoke after rain. She turned toward him slowly. I didn't think you noticed things like that. I notice everything you do. Her breath caught, but she didn't look away. He leaned back, exhaling through his nose. I used to think folks only wanted loud things. Big words. Big claims. But you don't push. You just stay. I've never been good at pushing. He looked over at her, eyes steady. Don't need to be. You're still here, aren't you? She nodded once, lips parted, but no words came. That night, he brought the rocking chair inside so she could sit near the fire and mend in peace. When she thanked him, he only said, "You ought to be comfortable. That's all." The falcon's wing heeled crooked, but it flew short distances now. Sarah started leaving the shed door open during the day, watched it hop to the branch outside and sit there, watching her as she hung laundry or chopped herbs. Rhett watched too, from the edge of the cabin, arms crossed. One morning, he handed her a rough, wrapped bundle. Inside was a pair of moccasins, hand-stitched from soft buckskin, dyed pale blue at the toe. "They're yours," he said. "Saw you limping again yesterday." She ran her fingers along the seam. "Did you make these?" He shrugged. "Learned from an old crow hunter. He said cold feet make weak minds. They're beautiful." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I just wanted you to have something that fit." She stood there a long moment, then stepped forward and rested her hand gently on his chest. "Thank you." His breath hitched, just once. Then his hand covered hers, warm and certain. Neither of them moved. The falcon called softly from the tree, and the wind shifted, bringing the scent of cut pine and something else, something new. They stood like that until the sun crested the ridge, casting gold over the cabin eaves. The first frost came early that year. One morning in late August, Sarah woke to the sound of ice cracking in the water bucket and saw her breath puffing in the half-light. The trees hadn't turned yet, but the air held that brittle stillness, a warning tucked inside it. She pulled her shawl tighter and stepped outside. Rhett was already gone, rifle missing from its peg, his tracks fresh in the cold crust of dirt. A scrap of canvas flapped on the woodpile. She folded it down and turned toward the shed. Inside, the falcon was gone. Only a few downy feathers remained in the corner near the perch. She stood a minute, hands folded in front of her, then left the door open behind her as she walked back. Later that day, Rhett returned with a brace of ptarmigans and a shallow gash across his forearm. He said nothing as she cleaned the wound, only watched her face while she worked, his jaw tight. "You should have wrapped it yourself," she said, dabbing gently. "I didn't want to ruin the stitching." She looked up. "You made it even," he said. "Straight as a line. I couldn't match that." She sat back on her heels. "You could have asked. I didn't want to bother you." Her hands stilled. "That's what I always used to think. That asking meant burdening someone." He studied her. "And now? I think it's worse to leave someone guessing." He didn't respond, but his fingers brushed hers as he stood, just once, as though testing a thought before speaking it aloud. By September, the days shortened. He built a smoke rack behind the cabin, and she helped him strip thin curls of meat to hang. She worked without needing direction now. He no longer hesitated, handing her a knife or asking for her eye on the weather. One afternoon, as they shelled dried beans by the fire, she asked, "What's the thing you miss most?" He didn't answer right away. The fire snapped, and the bowl between them filled slowly. "Sound of a fiddle," he said finally. "My mother played. Used to leave the window open when she practiced. I'd sit outside and listen, even when I was too old to admit I liked it." Sarah smiled faintly. "I used to hum when I was frightened. My sister said it made her feel steadier, like I was holding the air still." He turned his head. "You haven't hummed here. I haven't been frightened here." He looked back at the fire. "You've got a calm about you. It's not loud, but it holds." Neither of them spoke after that. The fire softened, and the beans clicked gently into the bowl. The next week, she found a rolled bundle of cloth beside her cot, fine wool, deep green, with a skein of thread tucked inside. She brought it to him as he repaired the latch on the shed door. "You didn't mention needing anything stitched," she said. He straightened. "It's not for me." She hesitated. "Why give me something so fine? You've worn the same dress since you got here. Figured you'd want something warm before the snow." She ran her hand over the cloth. "It must have cost you. I traded pelts. I don't use coin much." She folded the fabric slowly. "I'll make it last." He nodded once, then turned back to the latch. That night, she began cutting the pattern by lamplight, careful with each piece. The wool smelled faintly of cedar and smoke, and her fingers moved with a quiet purpose she hadn't felt in years. As she stitched, Rhett sat on the floor, carving. He didn't say what it was, but the wood was smooth and pale, shaped carefully in his palm. When the first snow fell, they were sitting on the porch. He handed her the carving without a word. It was a falcon, wings tucked, eyes sharp. She turned it in her hand. "You remembered. I remember everything you touch." She looked at him then, truly looked. His face was worn at the edges, but his eyes held something steady, something that asked without pressing. She rested her hand on his knee. "I didn't come here for you," she said, "but I think I stayed because of you." He looked down at her hand. "I never expected anyone like you," he said, "but I can't imagine this place without you now." The wind shifted and snow drifted across the steps. She didn't pull her hand away. He covered it with his own, warm and rough. Inside, the fire waited. The cabin, once quiet and hollow, now held something fuller. Not loud, not sudden, just lasting. The wind pressed harder against the cabin as October deepened, bringing long nights and a sky so clear it felt like glass. The woodpile shrank each week, but neither Sarah nor Rhett spoke of it. They worked beside each other now without needing to fill the air. It was in the way she passed him a tool before he asked, or how he poured her the last of the coffee without glancing up. She wore the green dress by the hearth one evening, mending a seam near the cuff where it had caught on a splinter. Rhett sat across from her, sharpening the tines of a fish spear. The firelight caught on the edge of his jaw and the line of his throat, and he looked younger in the quiet. "You ever think about what you wanted before you came west?" he asked. Sarah kept her eyes on the fabric. "I used to imagine a room with a door that locked. A place where no one talked over me." He set the spear down. "You have that now." She looked up. "It's not the same when someone gives it to you without making you fight for it." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "I didn't give you anything. You made space here, quietly but sure." The kettle whistled, and she rose to pull it from the flame. As the steam curled between them, she poured 2 tin cups full and handed him one. "Did you ever want anything different?" she asked. "For a while I thought I'd travel more. Colorado. Maybe all the way down to the Guadalupe Mountains." "Why didn't you?" "Didn't seem right. Leaving something half-built behind." She sat again, cradling her cup. "What did you leave half-built?" He hesitated. "Myself, mostly." The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Sarah reached for the hem of her dress, ran her fingers over the fabric. "Do you still feel unfinished?" "Not lately." She looked at him then, her gaze steady. "I think I stopped waiting to be finished. I just started living." That night, she left the door to the lean-to closed and made her bed near the hearth. Rhett didn't question it. He brought her a second quilt and banked the fire higher. They slept on opposite sides of the room, but the space between them held something different now, not distance, but pause, as if the air itself had changed direction. The next morning, she rose early and stepped outside to find the ground dusted with snow. The trees had dropped most of their leaves overnight, and the sky hung low and pale. Rhett joined her on the porch, pulling on his coat. "We'll need to trap more before the rivers freeze." "I can go with you." He studied her a moment. "You're sure?" She nodded. "I want to know what you see when you're out there." They walked north into thick woods, where the snow hadn't yet touched the soil. Rhett showed her how to find tracks beneath the pine duff, how to read the broken stems where a fox had passed. When they came upon a half-frozen pond, he pointed to the shallows. Otters sometimes come here. They leave slides in the mud. She crouched beside him, touching the edge of the print. You know this land like it speaks to you. It does in its way. But you listen better than I do. They set snares in silence, then sat on a fallen log to rest. A hawk circled above, its cry sharp against the hush. I used to think I had to earn my place by making myself louder, she said. But you never asked me to be anything I'm not. He glanced sideways. Why would I? You're the only thing out here that feels right just as it is. She pulled her mittens tighter, swallowed against the heat in her chest. I never believed I'd be wanted without changing first. I never believed I'd want someone enough to stay. She turned toward him fully. You're not the one who stayed. I am. He nodded. Then maybe we both did. They didn't kiss, not yet, but his hand found hers, mitten to mitten, pressed together between them on the log. It was enough. That evening, she lit the lamp before he could reach for it. He watched her from the table, fingers curled around his cup, the silence rich and full. Outside, the snow deepened. Inside, the cabin held a warmth that didn't come from the fire. The cold deepened as November settled over the valley in earnest. Snow gathered in the corners of the cabin windows and softened the sound of everything outside. Sarah's hands stayed busy from dawn until the last of the coals turned to ash, darning, stirring, stacking, folding, but her mind moved quieter now, less concerned with the weight of silence, more attuned to the shape of it. Rhett had begun carving a second stool during the gray afternoons, splitting the wood with a care that told her more than his words ever could. The old one creaked too much beneath her knees, he said, and that was all. She didn't argue. There was comfort in how he noticed things without needing to explain them. One evening, as she swept ash from the hearth, she paused and straightened. Do you ever wish for company besides mine? He looked up from the oilcloth where he cleaned his rifle. Is there something you're not saying? She shook her head. No, I've just been thinking how far we are from everyone. From anything. He leaned back, hands still. I used to think I needed to be out of reach to feel safe. Maybe I still do, partly. But I don't wish for anyone else. She turned toward him slowly. You're sure of that? I've been sure for a while now, he said. I just didn't want to say it before you were ready to hear it. She walked over, sat beside him at the table. The wood was worn smooth with use, and the lantern glowed between them. I still have trouble knowing where I belong. But when I wake up here, I don't reach for anything else. He rested his palm on the table, fingers open. When she placed hers over it, he didn't move, just watched her. I was thinking, he said. Once spring thaws the creek, we could build another room. Just enough space for a loom or a spinning chair. If you wanted it. She blinked. You'd do that. I'd build whatever you need. Not because I owe you. Because I want to. Her throat tightened. I never thought I'd be wanted like that. I didn't think I had it in me, he said. Turns out I do. They didn't speak again that night, but when they rose the next morning, her things were already inside the cabin. Neither of them commented on it. Through the long weeks that followed, they settled further into each other. He taught her how to find dry tinder even beneath snow, and she showed him how to mend his shirt cuffs with linen so the edges wouldn't fray. She started singing under her breath while she worked old hymns, mostly slow and low. He never interrupted, only sat nearby, listening like it stitched something back together in him too. By Christmas, they had traded smoked meat and salt with a Metis family passing through on snowshoes. Rhett offered pelts he'd saved, and Sarah gave them a pair of mittens she'd made from scraps. In return, they received a small sack of flour and a bundle of dried apples. That night, she baked a simple cake sweetened with molasses. Rhett lit an extra lantern and they ate by its light, not speaking much, sharing warmth without needing to fill it with words. Later, as the wind rattled the shutters, he stood behind her near the fire and said, I've never had a woman stay through the winter. She turned toward him. I've never stayed anywhere that felt like mine. He cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheek. It's yours. This place. Me too, if you'll have me. I already do. That night, they lay together for the first time. No urgency, no rush, just the slow, reverent unfolding of trust. His hands were rough but careful. Her body trembled, but not from fear. They moved like people finding shelter in one another, not escape. When morning came, snow had piled so high they couldn't open the front door. They laughed, truly laughed for the first time as they shoveled it out together, cheeks red and breath rising in clouds. Winter passed in its slow way. By late March, the creek ran high again, gorged with meltwater. They began clearing a space beside the cabin for the new room. He built the frame from pine. He felled himself. She helped raise the walls, her muscles sore but her heart light. In April, they married on a Sunday morning. No preacher, just two people standing beneath a budding aspen tree, speaking vows they wrote in quiet the night before. Martha came south to witness, and she brought a cast iron skillet as a gift. "I figured you'd last," she said, slapping Rhett's back. "Even a man like you can't outrun someone who listens that well." When she left, Sarah watched her go with a kind of peace she hadn't known she was capable of. She didn't feel abandoned. She felt rooted. That spring, she planted a patch of vegetables along the southern slope and hung a braid of drying lavender above the hearth. Rhett built her a spinning stool, just as promised, and carved a tiny sun into the leg where her heel would rest. Every evening, they sat on the porch, watching the light stretch longer. Sometimes they spoke. More often, they didn't. It didn't matter. They had made something together, not loud or grand, but lasting. And lasting was what they needed.